Hey everybody, John Flea here from Insightful Recordings, and today we're going to be going over how to create lo-fi tones. Now, this process can be used for guitar, vocals, drums, anything really, so keep that in mind while we're going through this. Now, what is a lo-fi tone? Well, lo-fi just is short for low fidelity, and while low fidelity kind of means low quality, don't at all think this means low effort. This is actually a desirable sound and is actually used in all sorts of genres of music today, and there's actually entire genres based around it completely. A lo-fi tone could just mean lacking in low-end body or high-end clarity or maybe even dynamic range, just overall not sounding as full as most modern music today. Well, it's worth mentioning that there are actually plugins that shortcut the process of achieving this sound. One of these is Gain Reduction by Joey Sturgis Tones. While this is a vocal compressor, it has this little lo-fi switch on here, which is pretty handy and does a really great job of getting a quick lo-fi sound. Now, since this is a vocal compressor, it does sound kind of weird on other instruments, but I mean, if you have it, play around with it, see what you can achieve with it, and yeah, it's a cool way of getting a quick lo-fi sound. There's also Vinyl by Isotope. It's a free plugin, and again, really cool. You can just kind of switch through these years on here, and it basically morphs your sound into something that they believe is representative of whichever year you have selected. Now, while plugins like this are great for achieving a quick sound, I do feel like they kind of restrict you in the creative process because, yeah, sure, it can be easy to just throw vinyl on your plugin chain, set it to 1960 here, 1950, whatever, and then keep moving forward. Then you get in the habit of resorting to plugins like this frequently, and you don't really get creative diversity when creating these lo-fi sounds, and at the end of the day, they're all going to sound just like this plugin. So we're just going to ignore plugins like this today, and for the time being, we're going to do it the way I do it. We're going to just simply use EQ. Now, real quick, this is a mix in progress from a song I wrote for my band a while back. I'm just going to show you how I used a lo-fi tone in context. This is a part where I used a lo-fi tone to make the incoming part more impactful. So right here we have our rhythm guitars, and then we have our lo-fi tone down here in the dark green. So let's just give it a listen. So you'll hear there that I used a lo-fi tone, something really thin sounding, really small sounding, to actually make the entire part sound more dynamic. It basically made the big hits hit a lot harder because there was such a small sound in between each. But how do we accomplish this? Well, basically what I'm going to do, I'm just going to remove the processing here. All we have on this chain is Helix Native for my guitar tone, which is basically a complete copy of the guitar tone that I used on my rhythm guitars, and then an EQ. So I'd urge you first to basically spend some time getting your guitar tones right, get them sounding the way you want, and then when you're ready to morph that into a lo-fi tone, then jump into this process. So we're going to mute the EQ we have on the chain right here, and we're just going to listen to a small section soloed out so you hear what the unaffected tone sounds like. Cool. So it sounds like a heavy guitar tone. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add an instance of Waves Q3 because I really only think I'm going to need 3 bands. And the process is really simple. We're going to start with a high pass. Let's get a loop going here. We're going to start with a high pass and also a low pass. So first let's bring the high pass in. We basically want to listen and slowly bring that high pass up to a point where we're losing a lot of the woofiness of the low end. And we want to bring it up to a point where there's still clarity in the mid-range, but again, it doesn't sound like it's very full anymore. And then we can kind of do the same thing with the low pass. We're going to slowly bring that down until the point where we can still tell what the guitar is doing, but a lot of that high-end clarity is no longer existent. All right, so let's just give that a quick listen, bypassed, and then back on. So cool. You could really actually just stop there if it sounds good in your mix, good with your tone, and leave it at that. You could also create different variations of these low and high passes at different frequencies depending on the part of the song. You can automate this. You can do all sorts of creative things with it. You notice I did lose a bit of volume right there by cutting out so much low and high end. So we could either just do some makeup gain over here to replace that, or you know what I usually like to take a third band and just pick a frequency within here that sounds kind of cool and give it a little bit of a boost. You want to pick something that isn't like painful to the ears, because at this point the tone is really sensitive, and by boosting anything within here, it's going to stand out a lot. And you don't want the listener not to be able to tell what the tone is doing. You still want it to sound like the part that's being played, but you just want it to be able to sound super thin and separated from the other guitars in the mix. But yeah, I think this sounds pretty cool right here. Again, it's going to be different depending on your tone. I urge you to basically sweep around and see what sounds best and kind of create something cool out of this. Now, this is where I would usually leave it. If it sounded good in the mix right here, I would just roll with this and move forward. But there are other things that you can do to further affect the sound. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do such a creative sound like this. Lo-fi can really mean so many things, and it doesn't always have to sound so lacking in low end. There's plenty of lo-fi songs that have lots of low end still, but basically just sound thinned out in a different way, or smaller, or maybe tighter in the stereo spectrum. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll crush it with a compressor as well and just see if that kind of makes it sound even cooler, or maybe add another type of distortion or a saturation. Let's, for the sake of the tutorial, just try throwing a compressor on here and squashing the tone a little bit. So we're going to use one of my favorites, the CLA 3A from Waves. Yeah, let's just add some compression. Probably get pretty heavy-handed with it and just see what we can make it sound like. Sounds kind of cool, kind of accents the mid-range a little bit more. That's probably where I would leave it. Let's just see how it sounds in the mix compared to what I originally had there, EQ-wise. Cool. I mean, that sounds pretty good to me. That's pretty much where I would leave it in the mix. Again, there's plenty of different ways to go about doing this. There's no right or wrong way. This is really a creative sound and doesn't really have any rules to it. But this is my way of going about it and the way that I use it in music that I work on. So hopefully you learned something. If you have any different ways that you achieve a lo-fi sound that you want to share, leave it in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. But thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video.